a concept of sales appointments. And, in particular, we're going to talk about in-person sales appointments. You set up an appointment with somebody, you go out to the facility, whatever. But a lot of this stuff applies to, phone calls and phone appointments, and even virtual appointments, Zoom and that sort of thing. So I think this is really important. It sounds like a basic concept, but boy, have I seen this messed up over the years, with our own salespeople, other salespeople that have come in to try to sell us things. And, a lot of them are common sense things that we all know, but, hey, we're humans. We forget things. We get in our pattern and kind of, just once in a while, we just forget what we're doing. So this is a reminder also, but, so pay attention. You'll pick up a couple things, I guarantee it. And if you follow sort of this formula and these guidelines, you're really going to have success, and you're going to have a lot higher chance of closing that sale when you show up. So, again, this applies regardless of, the format, and it applies whether you're actually doing the sales yourself as the business owner. You've got salespeople that are going out doing it for you because, hey, you need to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're being as most effective as they can, because ultimately the buck stops with you. So, and a little sidebar about appointments, just because it's a pet peeve of mine, and I think it's something that's misunderstood. People really get this idea that, hey, if I got an appointment, then all I got to do is go out there and, excuse me, they're going to sign the order, they're going to sign the contract or whatever, as if it's a done deal. And, it doesn't work that way. We got to remember, we still have to persuade this person that we're the best solution for whatever problem they're facing. And, appointments have a spectrum of interest. Sometimes, if you have an appointment setter who's particularly good, they may be able to slam somebody into an appointment. Then you go out there and that person has absolutely no interest, which, our company has made a point of not doing over the years. We don't incentivize our appointment setters to do that, to get somebody to, agree to an appointment, because you can manipulate people into that. But, what kind of fun is it when you drive 2 hours to an appointment and the person says, oh yeah, I agreed to this appointment to get the caller to stop talking, and get them off the phone. So it's not a done deal. So, and the thing is that people forget, though, is that we don't know. So you don't know when you're going out there what's the situation is going to be. You can do all the research, you can find out about somebody, but you really don't know the situation you're in. And you also don't know the long-term ramifications of that appointment. For instance, let's say you go out on an appointment and somebody is kind of wishy-washy interested, or your product or service just doesn't make sense for them, so you don't sell them. But guess what? They don't say anything, but then next week they're having lunch with a friend of theirs and they go, I had this sales guy come by last week and talk to us about this IT solution or whatever it was. It didn't make sense for us, but, from what I know about your company, Fred or whatever, that actually might work for you. So you should call this guy. So you never really know, the long-term effects of an appointment, and it's not just about that specific meeting. So keep that in mind. So that's kind of just a general philosophy on appointments. But so, let's get back to the main topic here. So what do? Showing up is the first stage, of course. And it sounds so ridiculous, but how you're dressed is critically important. There's a big difference if you're selling, John Deere equipment. I don't know anything about construction equipment, but let's say you're selling, tractors or bulldozers, whatever, to a company. You go out there and they dress a certain way. They're in the construction industry. They're probably not wearing suits and ties. So you run out there in a suit and tie and you're just one of those banker Wall Street guys to them. So that's the wrong message. And so you want to dress like they dress professionally, but, I don't know if they're wearing t-shirts or whatever. Maybe you don't want to do it that far, but in other words, you want to do a much more casual thing. And again, that, should make common sense. But again, we sometimes forget about that. It's much easier to stay with our normal uniform, so to speak, that we wear. So we want to match the situation, match the prospect, because again, appointments and sales is all about what the prospect is interested in, not us, because they don't care about us. So, as a funny thing, we, years and years ago, this is like probably 15 years ago, we set up an appointment for a client of ours who was a mergers and acquisition guy, a business broker, and he went out to meet with, a prospect. And, typically the prospects don't call us back as the appointment setters. They'll call the client, or whatever, if they have a question about something. But somehow this prospect got our number and called us back after the fact and said, hey, I'm not trying to complain or anything, but just so you know, the client that you're representing that you set up this phone call for, he showed up in a blue leisure suit, and this guy was just a goofball. And, so we always joke about the blue leisure suit thing. So, how you're dressed makes a big impression with people. So we got to get that right. Again, very basic, but very important. What's another big thing? Being on time. I mean, again, that should be so obvious, but you need to be on time. Typically 5 to 10 minutes early is the best way to show up. You don't want to show up a half an hour early, and you don't want to show up 10 minutes late. As a business owner, my time is valuable, and so is our prospects' time. And I'll tell you what, if somebody has a sales appointment with me to show me something, and if they are 1 minute late, deal's off. I don't care if I need the product or not. I will find somebody else to sell it to me, because to me that shows a lack of respect. Now my wife will be late to her own funeral, and that some people are just not as time sensitive as I am. I'm a little anal in that regard, but when it comes to business, you never know who you're dealing with. So it's much better to be on time, and you don't have an excuse that there was an accident on the freeway or whatever. So when I was out as a young man going on sales appointments and everything, I would literally, if I knew it was going to take 30 minutes to get there, I would leave an hour early and just park around the corner. And yes, I would sit in, the car and do whatever, read a book or something for 30 minutes, but I had to guarantee that I would never be late. And so it's amazing to me how many people do that. And, prospects, they don't care what your excuse is. There is no excuse for being late. So be there on time, and another thing, gatekeepers. This is something that we run into, with our company that you hear about. And unfortunately, a lot of gatekeepers, whether it's a receptionist, again, you never know who you're talking to. With a lot of small businesses, it could be a family member, it could be the spouse of the decision maker that's answering the phone. You don't know, when you walk into maybe that's the granddaughter of the CEO of the company that's greeting you or whatever. So you need to treat all those people with respect, friendliness, kindness, all that good stuff that, we should all do as humans anyway. And again, it makes common sense, but it really is amazing. But I've seen this over the years that people think, oh, well, they're just the peon receptionist or whatever. I don't want to, let me through to the decision maker type, and that's on the phone or in person, and, that's really a dumb way to do it, because that person has so much influence over a decision maker. I know at our company, if somebody comes in and treats a gatekeeper in a less than respectful way, I will actually ask the gatekeeper after the appointment. I'll say, what's this person like? How'd they interact with you? Because that tells me more about them and their product and service than whatever they said to me, because it doesn't matter. I want to know what they're doing when I'm not looking at them. So get that right. You need to win over the gatekeeper, make sure they're on your side, and don't offend them, quite frankly, because they have a lot of influence with a decision maker. Other things, again, makes common sense, but we forget about this stuff. Kind of observe your surroundings. You walk into an office and there's usually a theme. There's is this I don't know how to say it, an uptight type of place? Is this what you would consider like a law firm, feel, where it's very professional and very buttoned down, or is this a tech company where people are running around in t-shirts and, playing ping pong or whatever? That's going to give you an idea of the culture of the company, which allows you to relate to people much more in the conversation. So pay attention to the surroundings, because that theme needs to go along with how you present what you're going to do. So let's get into the actual thing. Let's say you get through the gatekeeper. They give you access to the decision maker. You sit down with them. What are some of the main things you should do? And I'll just give you sort of a quick list, and then sort of an outline of how to handle things. First, you've got to obviously introduce yourself. And again, people have a tendency, just like over the phone, and we talked about this in some of the other videos on scripting, but people have a tendency to talk about themselves. They'll get in there, they're nervous, and they'll say, okay, I'm Robert Poole, and, I started in B2B 20 years ago, and I went to this school, and, my company is the greatest. We won all these rewards, and blah, blah, blah. And the decision maker is just sitting there going, I don't care who you are, or I don't care anything about your company. Shut up, And so we've got to get over our own egos get our introduction out of the way quickly, they don't even have to remember our name initially. So, it's, hey, I'm Robert Poole with TBR. Thanks for taking the time to see me today. And then right into, hey, so what's going on with your company, or, some kind of personal type of thing, if you, notice something in the office to strike up the beginning of the conversation, something like that. So again, get the focus off yourself. What's the next thing? You want to really ask them questions about themselves, ask questions. So again, people have a tendency to talk when they're nervous. And so the best thing you can do is to ask somebody a question, because that gets them focused on them, which is what they really care about. Nobody cares about anybody else in this world. We all are self-centered, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just that it's human nature. That's the way we're made, so we generally think in terms of us and our world, so to speak. So we've got to involve them and let them tell us about themselves, And some people, you give an opening and they'll tell you their life story, which is fine. Other people, you got to kind of pull it out of them, But you want to spend most of your time asking questions, because when you do that, they're going to reveal everything to you. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So, you've got to ask questions. You've got to create rapport. And what's rapport? Rapport is basically just, how do you get along with somebody? How do you make them feel at ease? How do you make them feel comfortable and bring down those natural barriers to a stranger, And, I'm going to do a whole video on, how you create rapport, but, it's things like mirroring and matching, body language. And that does, again, that's over the phone just the same. It's a different type of thing, but, mentioning or using different speech patterns. When somebody is from the South, they typically speak, slower. But hey, thanks for coming in today. Well, and then you get somebody from New York. Hey, thanks for coming in today. I'll talk to you, and then you get everybody in the middle. And of course, if a Southerner talking to somebody in Manhattan is probably going to think, oh, it's a jerk from the Northeast. And somebody from Manhattan is probably going to be talking to somebody in Alabama going, listen to this idiot, they speak slowly like they're a dummy or something, which is of course not the case, but that's the perception sometimes. And that's one of the reasons, when our callers, set appointments and things, for our B2B telemarketing product, we match them up with different regions because of the rapport factor. So, there's other things you can do, the single biggest thing, smile, as they say. When you smile, you can say anything. And, use somebody's name. There is, I think it's probably How to Win Friends, Influence People, Dale Carnegie. But basically, I've forgotten how the phrase exactly goes, but it's to the effect of, there's no sweeter sound to a human than their name in any language. And that's true. So, when I'll talk to somebody, I will say, hey, Bob, da, 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 da. So Bob, let me do it. So, and Bob, what's the, so I'm constantly repeating their name. And it feels weird at first, the first few times you do it, because you feel like, geez, they're going to say something that I'm, making fun of them by saying their name over and over again. But again, people love hearing their name, so they're not even noticing it. So use their name, what's the another thing? The body language. And this is kind of a sub part of rapport, so I'm going to put it down here. And again, I'll do a whole video on this, but the body language of somebody. And this is one of the best guides you have when you're in person and virtual for that matter. And you can even hear it on the phone a lot of times. But body language will tell you as you're going through the sales process with somebody, that HSC process, they'll tell you, they'll guide you. You'll be able to figure out, what was that hot button? What did they suddenly light up at a certain point? Did they lean forward? Did their eyes get bigger? Did they, shrink back a little bit because they didn't like what you said? All those things that we pick up on as humans, So we've got to pay attention to that stuff. Little things like, and I've talked about this on different videos, but the idea of scripting. If you don't have a script, people think about scripts on the phone, but when you're in person, you need to have a script too. In other words, you need to have memorized things that you're going to say as you go through the conversation with the prospect. You always get the typical, objection to using scripts. Well, every conversation is different and you can't read a rote line of things, even if you memorize it. And that's true, but you're not supposed to be memorizing it to just spit it all out at once. You're supposed to be using different parts of that script to insert into the conversation, because guess what? You're using scripts anyway. We all say the same thing, the same phrases, the same, concepts. We'll explain it in the same way every time almost. So the question is, have we thought about it and we've done it in advance versus just whatever happens to come to mind one day and then we start repeating that. So you've got to memorize the scripts. And so that's part of going through with the decision maker. Whoops, I forgot to write it down here, scripts. And then, a couple other little things, don't ever badmouth a competitor. It makes sense. You think, hey, XYZ, they've got an inferior product. They're a bunch of scam artists. You know that they're unethical. If let's say you have a competitor that's a really bad company and you know that, it doesn't matter. You don't want to badmouth them. If the prospect brings it up and says, oh yeah, dealt with XYZ and da-da-da, and you can just say, oh yeah, that's too bad. Or, if you bring up somebody, a competitor, and you're comparing yourself to them, you want to say, hey, there's great people over there, got a great product, whatever. However, ours is this. And so you never want to do that. Never want to badmouth somebody, because it just, one, you never know who you're talking to. Again, it could be, they could have a relative that works there. Their spouse may work there, their mom and dad, who knows? So don't stick your foot in your mouth on something like that. And one of the things that I would say probably younger salespeople tend to do is somebody asks them a question and they will just they'll freeze because they think, oh geez, I don't know the answer to that. They'll hem-haw around and basically try to make up some answer. So, the last thing I would say is, be honest. If you don't know the answer to the question that a prospect's asked you, what you should say is, you know what, I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that. Either because, you've never encountered that or you're new, whatever, it doesn't matter. You say, I don't know the answer to that, but hey, I'll find out for you and I'll give you a call this afternoon, or I'll email you with the answer to that. And people appreciate that. They don't expect you to know everything, So don't make the mistake of feeling like it's, something that you're not a good salesperson, or you're not doing your job if you don't know the answer to everything, because nobody does. So these are just some random tips, on how to do that conversation. So let me give you first, just lastly, a quick outline of kind of how to do the process. The biggest thing with an appointment is figuring out what it is that the prospect really wants. What are their emotional triggers? And, people have a tendency to leave it on a surface level. So, what we're really looking for, and we talked about this in other videos, is really what's the result that person is looking for? What is the main problem that they're trying to solve by even talking to you? Because in their mind, there's some kind of problems they're trying to solve. And so, the question is, how do we find that out, And it's through, again, asking questions. And people will give us little hints through body language and through how things they say to give us that idea. And we have to keep probing. So we've got to keep the conversation focused on trying to find out what's that ultimate result they're trying to find. And it's usually an emotion. In B2B, people think that, it's B2B, so all that matters is numbers, and they're just going to pick the vendor that's got the best pricing and features and whatever, because they got to present it to somebody else because it's not their money and blah, blah, blah. But that's not really true, because we're all human, and we're motivated by emotional things, So that person, let's say in a B2B scenario, let's say they're a buyer or something, the reason they're choosing a product is so that they can impress their boss, so they can feel like they got a good deal, so they can, talk to their other colleagues and say, yeah, look at this good purchase I made or whatever. So, an ego boosting type of thing. So there's reasons, and we got to find out what those reasons are and what the most important one is. And it's all based upon the result. So all the questions should be surrounded by that. And this is where we really want to tailor the HSC model. We've talked about this in other videos, but, The hook, story, close model, which again, in every sales and marketing presentation can be used, no matter if it's a multi-million-dollar deal or you're selling a $20 widget. And how we integrate that, again, is going back to the result and the emotions involved in it. We've got to hook them into giving them a reason to listen to us. We've got to emotionally involve them with the story. And then, the final step is just giving them a reason to act now. And that's how we prevent buyer's remorse, because we're giving them logical reasons to buy now. And then afterwards, they can justify it to themselves. So because before, if we try to give them those reasons like most people do when they try to sell features and even benefits that list out all these things. Well, it's just logic. People don't move based upon logic. They move based upon emotions, which goes back to story and hook. So that's how we've got to integrate HSC into this. Let's see. Look at my notes here. I don't want to miss anything. I think one of the things that, if you've ever experienced this, I know I have early on in my sales career in particular, you're sitting in front of somebody and you're getting all the buying signals, so to speak. They're saying, hey, yeah, this looks good. Oh, so how soon could you implement this? That's a buying question, all those kind of things. And they're indicating that they're ready for you to pop the question, so to speak, and to say, here you go, let's sign the contract, or let's get moving on this, whatever the phraseology is that you're using. But a lot of us tend to go almost mentally, wait a second, I haven't done my whole sales presentation. I haven't given you all the objections. I haven't told you about this feature or whatever, So again, it's not about us, and we have a tendency to keep talking, and we literally are like talking them out of buying, So when they're going through that, when you hit those, those emotional hot buttons, and you could tell somebody is really excited about what you just said, that is the time when we need to ask for the order. It doesn't matter if it's 2 minutes into the conversation or 2 hours. When you see them lean forward, in an in-person thing, or you hear that in their voice on the other end, that they're like, oh, what do I do now, type of thing. That's when you ask for the order. And a lot of people, again, it's like, I got off my agenda, or something. I got to tell them about all this other stuff. And it's like, no, they've learned enough. They're ready to buy, and the emotional people are emotional. And so you got to take advantage of that high that they have right now and do it right then. So don't fail to ask for the order, and finally, I think the last thing, and I forgot to write that one down, but the last thing, is we've got to have the attitude with every appointment that this sale really doesn't matter in the sense that you don't need it. Because if you walk in there, humans are really smart, really. I mean, we can look at another human being and we can tell what they're thinking. We get a, women's intuition, so to speak, we always talk about, but all humans have that intuition where we can kind of get a feeling from somebody just based upon body language, the things they might say, and so they can tell when you're desperate. And, so if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get the sale or I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage, guess what? That comes through. It's a desperation, and they're sensing that, and that is turning them off. So we've got to walk into every sale with the attitude that, hey, this is the best thing for you from what I can tell. Here's all the options. This is why, from what you're telling me, this fits you, and this is going to solve your problem and give you what you want. And here's some reasons to do it so you can justify it to yourself. But if you don't want to do it, hey, whatever. That's not going to affect my life. And that takes a little bit of, practice. And like I said, if you're broke and trying to pay your mortgage, that's a little bit more difficult. But you've got to keep that mentality. And, of course, where does that come back to? Lead generation. Because if you're sitting there focusing and you don't prospect, like top professionals do, if you don't prospect, then you get yourself in trouble. And that's when you feel like you need to do something, and you've got to have this one sale because you don't have anybody else in the pipeline. So if you're going to go in there, you need to go in there with the attitude that, hey, you're trying to help this person out. If you see that it fits for them and it's going to solve and give them the result they want, sure, you want to try to, let them do it. But, ultimately it's their decision, and you can't do anything about that other than to present, how it's going to benefit them and how it's going to give them the result they want. So don't get tied up in that, because as soon as they realize that, it's not really going to bother you if they don't sign on the dotted line, that's when the people start chasing you, because, it's just human nature. They're like, wait a second, why is he not trying to push me into this? oh, this must be so good. I better take advantage of this now. Versus why is he pushing me into this? This is making me nervous, even though I like everything, but this guy clearly needs this really bad. So I don't know if I can trust him, all that kind of stuff. So these are all, again, some of these are common sense, but we all forget this stuff. I know I have over the time. I've find myself doing stuff and I realize later, wow, what was that? What was I thinking? I totally forgot some of the basics. So we always want to remind ourselves of the basics. So I would implement these. And the next time you go out on an appointment or your salespeople go out, go through this checklist and the things we talked about. And you can see areas that, oh, this little thing I got to do better. I got to do better at talking with the gatekeeper. I got to make sure that my clothing is fitting, the culture of the company and the industry they're in and all that kind of stuff. Little things, and how you create rapport with the decision maker. So really appreciate your time today. As always, if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of cool videos on it and they come out all the time, new ones. And if you have any comments, if you agree with me, disagree, I always try to answer stuff as much as I can personally. So appreciate your time today. And